Linguistics Behind the Scenes.
What you always wanted to know about language and how to explore it.
With Christina Sanchez-Stockhammer.
And Dominic Piazza.
Hi Dominic, time for another chat.
Yes, it is. Always happy to be back for another chat. Christina, how are you?
I'm fine, and you?
Doing all right. Doing all right. Happy to be back here. I am still in Germany, and Germany is renowned around the world for its beer, for being the land of beer.
That's so true.
But I was a bit worried before coming to Germany because, well, honestly, I hardly drink at all. But when I do, I don't usually opt for beer and wine. I usually opt for cocktails.
Oh, I love cocktails. But same thing as you. I mean, I hardly drink anything, but if I do, I like the sweet stuff and particularly cocktails.
Yeah. Same here. And I was worried, before I came, I don't really like beer. Will German society accept me? Of course, I mean that a bit humorously, but also maybe not. And of course, I learned that, Germans love cocktails too.
Absolutely. Well, I used to live very close to one of the best cocktail bars in Germany. I mean, it got some prizes, but unfortunately, for some reasons, it had to close down. But that was just so good. I mean, they were excellent. The alchemists of the night, as they called themselves.
Or the mixologists. Yes, I would have liked to visit that place. That's too bad. But I was here in Germany during the summer, and at least in Germany, maybe in other European countries, but during the summer, the most popular cocktail by far, in my view, is the Aperol Spritz.
Oh, yeah, it's so popular. I think you can get it everywhere now.
Everywhere.
It would be strange not to have it on a menu. I suppose it's a kind of very German cocktail in the meantime. I mean, not originally, I suppose, but so typical. What kind of cocktails are common in the United States, Dominic?
Oh, well, I hard for me to say all the basic ones. I'm a big fan of the screwdriver, which is vodka and orange juice. I believe in German you call it a vodka O.
Probably because O is sometimes used for orange juice because the O stands for Orangensaft.
Very nice. Very, very nice. Yeah, there's cocktail names are fun, especially how they compare across different languages. One of my favorites is there's a cocktail called a French 75. And it's named after a cannon, like an artillery gun from World War I, like a French, maybe like a 75 millimeter cannon. And the lore is that it's called the French 75 because drinking one feels like getting shot by a French 75 cannon.
Oh, wow. That's a very interesting origin of that name. I mean, one of my favorites is swimming pool, which is kind of bluish because of the blue curacao it contains. So I suppose that's where that name comes from. And I also really love pina colada, which, is a very creamy, cocoa-nutty cocktail. Love that one. But I actually very much like the alcohol-free version of it as well. And that's a coconut kiss.
Ooh, I gotta try one of those. Yeah, a mocktail. As they are called. Another word is virgin drinks. Never understood the origin on that one, but that is the word they use for an alcohol-free kind of cocktail. I'm also a fan of mocktails.
Yeah, me too. I mean, most of the time I actually try to go for the mocktails because then I can still think clearly, but at the same time enjoy how all those different tastes blend into something completely new.
Oh, excellent. Well, I agree. It's good to be able to think clearly because that way we can think about things like linguistics.
Exactly.
Yeah, mixology and linguistics might be more connected than people might think because while mixology is being an expert in mixing different ingredients together to make the best cocktail, in some ways, languages and words are a bit similar.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, at least I once wrote an article about that topic. It's about hybridization in language, which sounds a lot more serious. But the idea is the same. That is, considering to what extent languages are actually a mixture of different things at different levels.
Yeah, very nice. Hybridization. When I hear hybrid, probably first and foremost, I think of cars, hybrid cars, which are, cars that have both an electric engine and a gasoline powered engine or petrol, as they might say, on the other side of the pond. But I also think of plants, hybrid plants.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's where that concept comes from biology, basically. I mean, if you think about animals like a mule, a mule is an animal whose father is a donkey and whose mother is a horse. And you can also have the opposite. You can also have a hinny whose father is a horse and whose mother is a donkey. But in both cases, you are going to get an animal from that combination, which differs from donkeys and horses. So something completely new that arises from these different sources. So it's a bit like a cocktail. I mean, where things blend into something completely new.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there are a few hybrid animals. I always forget about that because it's just not so common, right? They have to be closely related enough that you can breed them. On the topic of the mule, in English, we have a saying, stubborn as a mule. I don't know if mules are really stubborn, but that there's a little linguistic connection there.
Yeah, there's a reputation. And I mean, there's plenty of animal idioms too. But I suppose that's something we should discuss another time.
Oh, that could be an episode in itself, yeah.
Definitely. But getting back to the animals, I mean, you're so right. I mean, they have to be similar enough somehow to be able to reproduce. That's a very silly joke in German, because there's an animal, the anteater, and the German name is Ameisenbär, which is ant bear. And obviously, I mean, it would be very difficult to conceive how an ant and a bear could have children with each other.
That's okay. That's okay because in other languages like Chinese, the word for a panda, if you literally break down the Chinese characters, it means bear cat, which I love, which it must be an allusion to the behavior of the panda, right? Which is the kind of lays about and they're rather slow and docile. I love that so much. And then a penguin is a business goose, which must be a reference to their black and white kind of appearance.
That's so sweet. But of course, I mean, in terms of hybrid animals, I mean, you could also have the spider monkey.
Oh, yeah.
Sounds, as if it was also engendered by spiders and monkeys. But obviously, I mean, that must have a different origin as well, I suppose.
Oh, yeah. Hedgehog, which is not a hog in the least. But, in German, you have this wonderful word. It's like an equivalent phrase almost for someone who is a jack of all trades.
Oh, yes. Eierlegende Wollmilchsau.
Yes, which means in English?
Well, it's an egg-laying wool milk sow. So it's an animal that produces all kinds of different produce that you would like to have as a farmer. But obviously, I mean, it's just imagined, but there's some beautiful images on that on the internet.
Yes, an imaginary animal that does it all and all in one. That is a wonderful phrase. I'd like to import that into English. So that might be a bit of an uphill battle, but I like that one very much.
Yeah, it's very sweet, of course. But I mean, that is imagined, but at the same time, of course, I mean, hybridity is something very, very real. And I mean, so this is something that we observe a lot in the field of biology. Like that's where the examples we just discussed came from. But of course, when we think about language, very often we also think about language as if it were some kind of animal or organism in any case. So, for example, we talk about the family trees of languages in history, or we sometimes say that languages die out or that they evolve. So it sounds as if we were treating language like an organism. And so it also makes sense to consider it from this perspective and see to what extent, well, mixtures, hybridization are possible there.
100%. We talk about this all the time in linguistics with the language families. Probably maybe the three biggest ones in Europe are Germanic languages like German and English, Romance languages, languages with roots in Latin, languages like French and Spanish and Italian and Portuguese, and then the Slavic languages, of course, languages like Russian and Polish and Czech. But when you put them together in these families, it might deceive you into thinking they're more similar than they might be. For example, English and German are part of the same Germanic language family. You might get the idea that they're very similar. But of course, English, quite famously, has assimilated so much vocabulary from other languages like French and Latin and Greek that in many ways it's quite dissimilar from German.
Yeah, that's true. Dissimilar, but at the same time, I mean, the basic vocabulary is still very similar, which makes it easy for Germans to get a kind of first grasp of it. But of course, also for speakers of French or of Spanish, I mean, there's quite a lot of words that they will recognize, very often more formal words. And then, of course, it's also easier to learn new vocabulary.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Often kind of the Latin or French-based vocabulary in English is kind of shared across some of these other Romance languages, but German as well. So when speaking German, I try to lean on Latin-based, kind of French-based words because there's a chance that it's shared in German often, but not always. And then, of course, in French, the common pitfall for an English speaker learning French is if you don't know the word in French, you just take the English word and pronounce it in a French way. Sometimes it might work. Other times it might not. In fact, other times it might even be a false friend. So you might end up saying something you don't intend to say.
Yeah, but very often it works. I mean, whenever people around me are trying to find a Latin word for something, I just try to use the Spanish word and then kind of, rework it into something that sounds Latin. And very often it's quite close. So I'm always quite happy to use that as a strategy. And so that means that the hybridity of the English language in terms of the historical origin of the vocabulary is, of course, an advantage. So there's a lot of advantages to hybridity, not just in language, but also in other fields.
I agree with you completely. The beauty in hybridity and in other fields as well. A moment ago, you mentioned biology. In places like the United States, genetic tests are very, very popular. I know the Europeans might think this is maybe a little bit funny or peculiar, but, because people in the United States, a lot of people have immigrant origins. They come from elsewhere. There's a lot of interest. You want to know where you come from. It's just, it can be really fascinating. And so these genetic tests are very popular where it actually tells you all of these different regions from the world, from which you have DNA ancestry. And it's a lot of fun. I got the test. I had a lot of fun exploring ancestry that I didn't even know I had. For example, I have a little bit of Spanish ancestry, and that was nowhere in my family's kind of oral history. There was nothing about Spain. I found that fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot about Spain in my family because I'm half Spanish. But right. I mean, if I go further back, I know that there's also some Italian ancestry, but I haven't done any genetic testing. I would say for different historical reasons, possibly also in Germany, people are possibly slightly more reluctant to do that. But of course, it's something very, very interesting.
Yeah, I do understand the historical sensitivity in the German context, but it seems to me that just in general in Europe, these kinds of ancestral DNA tests aren't so popular. Maybe it's because Europeans feel that they're more certain of their family history, right? That if you hail from a certain place, and as far as you know, all of your ancestors hailed from that same place, then you might not think that a DNA analysis would be so interesting. But I think what people would find is that, in actuality, over the millennia, people have been traveling around and intermingling for such a long time that actually I bet most Europeans have much more mixed ancestry than they would assume.
Oh, definitely. I would think so too, you know? And there's a very nice film about that too, about the big surprise that people get when they do genetic testing. In French, it's called Cocorico. It's by Julien Hervé. And for example, a person, I mean, he's French. He's very skeptical about Germans, but then he finds out that he actually has German ancestry. And all of a sudden, it completely changes his outlook on how he should behave and what cars he should get and things like that, which is very funny.
That is funny. I hope people don't necessarily. I hope, well, identity is complex. Do what you would like with your identity. Yeah, maybe I should start getting more into like flamenco, like Castilian culture and dance. Now that I know I'm like 5% Spanish or something like that. No, I don't think I will. I don't think I will. But yeah, that is wonderful. That is
yes,
wonderful.
Dominic, we could dance some flamenco together.
Oh yeah, well, that's my thing now. That's my thing. Now that I know, you can't unring the bell.
Just kidding.
I'm just kidding as well, or am I? But in some ways, hybridity can be better. For example, with like alloys and metal, right? Like gold, right? Like pure gold, as I understand it, is actually quite soft, softer than would be desirable. So they often mix it with things to strengthen it.
Yeah. So that's one advantage of hybridization, you know, and I mean, not just in the field of like metallurgy, but also in biology. I mean, if you think about the different plants.
Yes, and famously, this is absolutely the case with a lot of the fruits and vegetables that we eat, if not probably all of them, that through selective breeding, we have given these plants desirable traits and qualities that we wanted them to have. That for the fruits and vegetables that we eat today, if you were to look at what they looked like originally before we selectively bred them, they look almost unrecognizable. For example, the banana, right? The banana, what a wonderful, I love bananas. How wonderful that it fits perfectly in your hand and then you unpeel it. It almost looks like it was made to be eaten by people. And that's because it was selectively bred to have those exact qualities. If you look at what the banana used to look like originally in nature, it looked nothing like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I don't know enough about bananas, but I'm sure you're right. And I love bananas too. Yeah, but so hybridization has a lot of advantages. But then, of course, I mean, if you have a hybrid, sometimes it will not be able to reproduce. I mean, the mules and the hinnies, they're not able to have children.
They are sterile. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, yeah. So that's a disadvantage. And that's also why hybrids didn't have a very good reputation in the 19th century, for example. But then, of course, in the 19th century, people were also very much into very clear categorizations. And of course, that's the opposite of hybridization and hybridity, where you kind of transgress boundaries and make new things emerge. And this is something that with the development of genetics in the 1860s and particularly since the 20th century has been kind of reevaluated. So now it's considered more enriching. Well, that's the interesting thing. Very often you can view the same phenomenon from different perspectives and either value it as positive or negative.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, this has actually been hugely consequential for human history. This connection between language, linguistic purism, and kind of nationalism, and kind of the creation of nationalism. The idea that one nation of people should speak one single language, and that this brings them together. This creates identity, because in reality, that's just not really how language works. That but before this idea of the French nation or the Italian nation or the German nation existed, people in these regions spoke all different varieties of languages. They had to be like, there was a time when they were trying to construct, for example, the French state, where they had to teach French to the French because they chose one variety from one region, I think in this case around Paris, and then they had to teach that to everyone. And to this day, it can still be a sore spot. For example, in Brittany, where they still have a local language, the Breton language, which is not French, and they are trying very hard to keep it alive.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And they're also doing really well at keeping traditions alive. I mean, there's a lot of things like traditional dances that they perform. It's really, language is very often connected to culture. And don't make me define what culture is because this is really complicated. But in any case, yeah, it's so intricately connected, and it's also something highly emotional. But in the end, I mean, if we look at these things, if we look at languages like the German language, the English language, you will notice that there is no such thing as a pure language, because it's always been kind of taking vocabulary from different types of source. I mean, in English, it's particularly obvious with the English and, with the French vocabulary that you already mentioned. I mean, after the Norman conquest, after 1066, I mean, there's so many French words that entered the language. So I would say that's the most kind of obvious instance where we can see, okay, language as such can be hybrid, but actually there's hybridity on all kinds of levels.
Yeah, and what even is English? What even is German? What even is French? With English, we have American English, British English, Canadian English, Australian English. With French, we have Metropolitan French, we have Belgian French, we have Swiss French, we have French across large regions of Africa. With German, we have Germany, we have Austria, we have Switzerland. So many different varieties, and they can be quite different from each other. They can have different vocabulary, they can have different accents, but typically this nuance, I don't know, we just kind of talk about languages as if they are just monolithic things, but that's just so far from the reality.
Absolutely. And you can see how things are interconnected if you, for example, look at the level of the vocabulary, because these different words, these words with origins that are from Germanic languages, that are from Romance languages, can be combined. Take a word like textbook, the word text is ultimately of Latin origin, and book is a Germanic word, but they're combined into one compound, textbook. And as a user of the language, you're completely unaware of that. Or courthouse, yeah? Again, court is Romance, house is Germanic, but they're combined.
Yeah, I think among the more kind of like grammar linguistic purists, the sticklers who try to invent rules for English, there was an idea that maybe you shouldn't mix words and roots of different origins. Completely silly, because as you've shown, there are countless words where we do that. Another example is television, right? So I think tele is Greek and vision is Latin. It's a classic example right there. You can't separate. You can't keep languages from stuff. I mean, these things just naturally mix together. It's a fool's errand to try and keep these things separate.
Yeah, and why should you, Because take a word like to dislike. I mean, same thing there. So like is a Germanic word, so it's been around since Old English. But the prefix dis is of Romance origin, so French, Latin origin. And dislike is a completely normal word. And so that's the thing. So even within word formation, everything is combined, everything melts together. And that's nice because ultimately, that's what gives us the characteristics of the English language.
Yeah, I think it's really beautiful. And English in particular, like I said, it's famous, perhaps even infamous, for the fact that it just incorporates so much vocabulary from so many different languages. There's so many jokes you'll make, like English is 3 different languages in a trench coat and top hat or something like that, or English beats up other languages and steals vocabulary from their pockets or something like that. So many different little idioms and metaphors that people use that shows that they're very aware that English is this huge blend and mix, and I think it's awesome.
I think it's interesting that you're using the word steal here, because most of the time we speak of borrowings. So we borrow words from other languages, but actually we never give them back.
Same, loan word. Typically a loan, you're supposed to give it back. So loan words, it's not being given, it's taken. It's taken.
But on the other hand, probably it's a bit like fire. I mean, if you kind of borrow fire from someone, in the end, I mean, you don't really have to give it back, because it kind of, it's okay to also have that fire yourself, because it becomes more.
Yeah. There's also, I think people joke, like you might say like, hey, can I borrow a piece of paper? But obviously what you mean is, can I have a piece of paper? Because you're going to use it and you're going to keep it. You're not going to give it back. But maybe just borrow sounds nicer than to have. People also think that's pretty funny.
Yeah, but then this is something which is also kind of unique to language in terms of hybridization, but like also on other levels. Let's say you have a hybrid organism. I mean, you have that one person with that one genetic makeup, and that person is unique in the world. But if we have a hybrid word, like to dislike in English, I mean, we have this word in the system, but then it's used so many times by different speakers. So there's a distinction there between having the word in the system as a kind of abstract content and using it in different situations in real life. That's something that Ferdinand de Saussure, one of the founders of modern linguistics, stated, that there are these two different levels of langue, which is the system of the language, and parole, which is the actual realization in speech. And this means, that we don't have to give things back, because somehow, I mean, in the language, in the system, it's abstract anyway, and then the realizations are infinite in number.
Fascinating. Okay. So the langue and the parole. And so if my French isn't too rusty, that's the language or the tongue, so to speak, and then the word.
Yeah, that's right. So the langue is the system of the language, like all the words in the language and the grammar of the language, basically, as a kind of simplification. And then the parole is what you as a speaker make of it. So the system is always abstract as an idea, and the parole is the language that you can read in a book. Or when I talk to you, I'm producing parole, because any speech that I produce with my speech organs will be parole.
Okay, yeah. So the langue, well, there are some people who might want to control it, or at least claim to control it, right? The beauty of language is that there is no central authority on language. There's no central authority on English. There can be central authorities, at least, who claim to be the central authorities on the language and might seek to maybe influence or issue suggestions. I think the most well-known example is the Académie Française, or the French Academy in English, which is the authority on the French language, or at least the purported authority. In reality, I don't think anyone can really control it. It's the speakers who control language. But, for example, there are a lot of today English loanwords in French. There are English loanwords in probably every language. Best example I can think of is the word email. The French were using the word email, but the Académie Française thought it would be nicer if maybe they used a French alternative. So they suggested a courriel électronique, or an electronic courier, which would be elegantly shortened to courriel. However, as I understand it, it didn't really work. French people still say email, although I was recently looking at a government form from the French government, and it did use courriel. So maybe the French government listens to the guidance of the French Academy, but actual French speakers, they just kind of do their thing and say what they want.
Well, I mean, it's difficult to regulate language in general, But the Académie Française, I mean, I think they see one very important task in documenting the language and preserving those things that are kind of relevant, that belong to the core. And so writing a dictionary that, for example, records all the words that are part of the French language proper, but then they will wait a certain amount of time to see to what extent words are, for example, adopted by speakers. And, well, I don't know how prescriptive they are being right now. I mean, probably they were more prescriptive in the past, but then again, I mean, there are different linguists who are working on the topic of prescriptivism, but I think the effects have been different in the past in different contexts. So sometimes it's possible to push people in a particular direction. And for example, we've had that in Germany, with the orthographic reform. I mean, technically, no one has to spell the German language in that way outside of school and some institutions, but people still do because that's what they learned in school and that's what they see in most books and newspapers, and they want to conform to these ideas. But otherwise, very often, I mean, trying to tell people not to speak in a particular way, well, isn't always likely to be a success.
Yeah, with German, I think kind of the quintessential German letter is the sharp S or the SZ. To me, it's very German. I've only seen it in German. Maybe it's used in other languages, but I think probably people around the world also think of this. It looks like the letter B. Actually, it's really just more pronounced like an S. But actually, a couple of decades ago, or almost 3 decades ago now, there was actually some spelling reform in Germany which changed the rules surrounding how this letter gets used.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, because the word das, which occurs very, very frequently in the language, used to be spelled with a scharfes S, so with this SZ, but now it's spelled with a double S because now a double S is used after a short vowel, like in das or in Kuss, which means kiss. But if you have a long vowel or a diphthong, like in Fuß, then you would use a SZ.
Yeah. And then this creates a mess for people who learned the previous spelling. And then one of my German teachers was an older man. He said that before the spelling reform, his German spelling was brilliant. After the spelling reform, it was no longer brilliant. It was a little bit messy. Of course, does it really matter? It depends on who's enforcing it. So, if you're at school or if you're taking an exam or if you're doing a job where they want you to use the spelling reform, then you might actually face some consequences for not necessarily conforming to the new spelling.
Yeah. So, I mean, I also had to learn it because I wanted to work in a profession that uses language. But so kind of not using that would have meant that I wouldn't have been conforming to, let's say, the kind of standard. And even though you're not forced to use it officially, it's a convention to use it, and you might suffer negative consequences because people who know that kind of spelling might see how you're spelling if you're still using the old one and feel that something is lacking, that you're lacking a certain skill. So for that reason, in the end, that's how people sometimes conform to such reforms in spite of the fact that they're not officially forced in any way.
Yeah, thankfully for me, I'm learning German today well after the reform has taken place. So hopefully I won't be too confused. But actually, as I've learned, the Swiss don't use the SZ or the sharp S. They don't use it at all. They always use double S.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But by the way, since we're talking about hybridity, the sharp S, as you call it, the scharfes S or the SZ, is actually also a hybrid letter because it combines an S and a Z, at least the more traditional shapes of these two letters, into this completely new letter that looks more like a B to outsiders. And so I would also say, well, that you could also call that an instance of hybridity on the level of letters. And we also have hybridity, by the way, on the level of sounds, because if you think about words in connected speech, for example, the word broadcast, sometimes people might not say broadcast, but broadcast, and produce a g sound instead of the d. And that's very interesting because here the g sound carries over things both from the d, which is the voicing of the sound that should originally be there, but also of the k, which is the letter following it. So that's what we call assimilation. And so when you say broadcast, yeah, instead of broadcast, then, well, that would also be an instance of hybridity on the level of sounds.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. But the SZ, which to translate SZ, it's the SZ or the SZ for other English speakers, which sounds a lot more like SZ. It's literally an S and a Z kind of melded together. It doesn't quite look it, but if you go back in the history, it becomes more obvious. And it almost reminds me of the ampersand in English, which is also a ligature. It's et in Latin, et, which means and it's the two letters E and T have been melded together to create the ampersand symbol, which represents the word and well, it's not just kind of letters that come together in these ligatures, these kind of morphing together of two symbols. Words also do. You know, we get portmanteaus. We get
absolutely.
Words like brunch, for example.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I love brunch. Not just as a word, but also as a concept.
Yes, I agree. But do you have brunch on top of breakfast and lunch? Well, I guess it depends on the situation.
I mean, technically, brunch, if you look at the word formation, it's a combination of breakfast. So you have the br part and lunch. So that's where the unch comes from. So technically, it should be breakfast plus lunch. But then I would say it's neither. It's a kind of combination, but it's different from both breakfast and lunch, because you could go to a brunch and you might have had breakfast before, but then you might eat some breakfasty stuff and some lunch stuff and then kind of breakfasty stuff in between again. So it's a kind of mixture. The food you get there, it's not typically the food that you necessarily have for your own breakfast or for your own lunch, but it's kind of special food, and you typically go to some kind of restaurant or hotel to have it. So I would say it's something new that arises as a concept, but also if you look at the words themselves, they're kind of fused together.
Yes, they did. Yeah, I also view it as denoting the time that the gathering will take place, right? That it's at a time which is too late to be breakfast, but too early to be lunch. So I don't know. Right. Let's say maybe 11 a.m., 10 a.m. maybe. So in that way, it's not so much a description of what the meal will be, but rather when it will take place.
Yeah, a bit of all. So, and I think that really shows very neatly that it's a hybrid of breakfast and lunch. It's neither nor. It kind of borrows parts of it, but turns it into something new. And that's not the only blend or portmanteau word that exists in the language. There's quite a lot of these. There's also words, for example, like motel, which comes from motor and hotel.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah. And in that case, it's kind of obvious how you combine them, because you have the motor and the hotel. So using the O as the linking part makes total sense. But in other cases, it's probably more difficult. Think about a very beautiful hybrid, namely from the movie Shrek. Donkey and dragon, they have children. And you've seen that. I know you did, because you told me. So what would you call those children that are a mixture between donkeys and dragons?
I have no idea. A draki?
Yeah, could be. Other ideas?
A dongan?
Yeah. Or a donkey.
A donkey?
Yes. And that's the thing. It's kind of not self-evident. There's all these different things you could do. It's possible to kind of fuse donkey and dragon in different ways into this kind of hybrid. So it's something where the form, the shape of the word parallels the concept behind it.
Yes.
And I actually checked that. So apparently, officially, it's dronkeys, but it's not necessarily the most obvious one.
No, yeah. Not all hybrids follow this rule. Earlier we talked about the mule, which is a cross between a horse and a donkey. At this time, I would like to officially petition that we change the name to either a dorse or a honky.
Oh, I love it.
I love honky. Honky. Well, dorse is also pretty good, but I love honky. Honky is that's my. Maybe we can choose depending on which one is the father or the mother. We get to use both.
Yeah, exactly. And apparently they are more similar to the mother. And usually in English, the head is at the end of a word. So the mother should be placed at the end of the word.
Oh, okay. Very nice. Very nice. So if the mother was a horse, it would be a dorse. And if the mother was a donkey, it would be a honky. All right. Yeah. Now we're making progress.
Yeah, we actually have something similar in German. I mean, at least for one of the two, namely, we have the word Maultier and we have the word Maulesel. Tier is just
animal.
Well, animal. Yeah, forget about the first part, but tier is just animal. But in that case, that stands for the horse. But for Maulesel, I think there it's very nice and transparent because there the esel, the donkey, is at the end, and that's the mother. So that's a hinny. So a hinny is a Maulesel. But I love your suggestions, Dominic, and probably we should start a petition to rename mules and hinnies.
I agree. A petition to whom, right? There is no authority. You could petition the dictionary, but even the dictionary is not the authority. The dictionary just documents. So
it does. So the only way would be to get people to use it all the time. And in the end, it would end up in the dictionary because lexicographers monitor how people use language.
Well, then, yeah, that's right. Well, then the authority on language is the speakers themselves. So then it's a good thing we're making this podcast because we're getting the words out there. Maybe people will start saying them. Yeah, who knows? Well, this is the first step.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you know what, Dominic, there's a particularly nice one that I learned when I was in primary school. And that is because I grew up in a place where we have a river, which is called the Regnitz. And the Regnitz is the result of two other rivers flowing together, namely the Rednitz and the Pegnitz. So what the Regnitz does is that it borrows the R from the Rednitz and the G from the Pegnitz, and then you end up with the Regnitz. And as a child, that seemed so obvious to me that if rivers flow together, in the end, the names also flow together. But it's apparently not the most common pattern.
That is very funny. It was a portmanteau of sorts, and then. Well, children are very good at pattern recognition. So you thought this might just be a general pattern. That is so funny. Ha! Yeah. But I suppose when it comes to language hybrids, learning German, we talk a lot about Danglish, which for those who might not know, it's not immediately obvious. It's Deutsch and English, or German and English mixed together. In German, of course. So there are plenty of German words in English, some of which are used kind of in the right way, others which are sort of maybe a bit of German creations. We spoke previously about wasei-eigo, which is Japanese created English words that they use, but that English speakers don't use. So I don't know where they got it, but they made it somehow, and I think it's amazing. There's also in the US, we're very familiar with Spanglish because we have an incredibly large number of Spanish speakers. I recently learned it's the second largest Spanish-speaking country in the world, which I didn't know. Wow. And then in French, you have franglais, which is français, and anglais, French and English in French. And often when people are bilingual or multilingual, they end up kind of speaking these sorts of hybrids where they mix in words from different languages they know. Yeah. People do that all the time, So yeah, we also have that. I mean, so we also have hybridity in a certain way at the level of individual language use by individual speakers. Definitely. I mean, yeah. And
that's not the only one. I mean, in that article, I just went through the different levels of language and tried to see where else we can identify hybridity. And even in the field of grammar, we find hybrids in the sense that we can't have neat categories. For example, if you take a sentence like, they admired his quickly building the tower.
It's a nice sentence.
Case, very, very nice grammatical sentence. Yeah. But if we have, they admired his quickly building the tower, then building is very special because on the one hand, building is like a verb because it's about building the tower, and also quickly building the tower. So you have an object there, the tower, and you have a pre-modifying adverb. So all of this indicates it's a verb. But at the same time, it's also a bit like a noun because you say his building the tower, but his is a word that usually occurs before nouns. His car, his bottle, whatever, And so building in that case is what some grammars like to call a gerund. So it's got features of both nouns and verbs. So we do have instances also in grammar where we can say, well, it's a kind of hybrid.
Oh, that's very interesting because usually we think of grammar, the building blocks of language. Exactly. They're usually very nice and neat categories.
No, they're not at all. Not at all. And I mean, the building blocks of language, like words as the building blocks and grammar that kind of combines them as a kind of mortar. That's also kind of more traditional idea. But I think, that's probably content for another episode.
That's the way it's explained to us in school, but that's also probably to keep it simple because humans, the world is a very messy and chaotic place, but in a way that makes it so fascinating and interesting and beautiful. Also means it's very hard to understand. And so as humans, we naturally try to put things into nice and neat categories because it makes it easier for us to understand. But naturally, in that process, something is lost.
Absolutely. But I'm very much in favor of such simplifications because they help us deal with this complicated world, But then it's usually good just to know that behind that simplified idea, there's something which is way more complicated as a kind of next step. But so and that's the thing. I mean, we have hybridity almost everywhere. And that's also this kind of messiness in a certain way because, for example, we can also have hybrid modes of communication. I mean, think about chat, when you write in a chat, I mean, the language is quite informal. It's quite close to spoken language, but it's not spoken, it's written. So it's also kind of intermediate in some ways. Or,
that's right.
Or for example, there are certain types of text where you might say, oh, wait a moment, this is a mixture of different other genres, for example. For example, there's advertorials, which kind of combine advertising with journalism.
Yeah, or infotainment, right? Which I think is usually trying to make kind of educational content, which is simultaneously entertaining.
Yeah. Which is something that I really subscribe to.
Oh, yeah.
I like that.
Well, are we doing infotainment right now? I don't know.
Hope so.
I don't know. So. Yeah, I hope it's informative and entertaining. That is true. I hope it has these qualities to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's really a beauty in hybridity and hybridization. And I think it's unfortunate that, as we talked about, language is so closely connected to culture and identity. I think it's unfortunate that sometimes this hybridity is maybe stigmatized or discouraged. For example, we mentioned Spanglish. Sometimes Spanglish, sadly, it's not always viewed positively. Or for example, in Quebec, which is a province in Canada where they speak French, they are surrounded by English speakers on all sides. And so for this reason, they really want to kind of protect their kind of unique French identity. And so for this reason, in some ways, the use of franglais, French-English mixture can be discouraged in Quebec. But of course, plenty of people in Quebec do speak English. But when it comes to language hybridity, probably the most important subject here would be pidgin languages or even creoles, right? So pidgin languages are kind of new languages that are born when two languages come together. I think creoles are the same thing. I just think that creoles usually are associated specifically with the Caribbean. For example, number one is Haitian Creole, which is a Creole in Haiti, which is a mixture of local native language and French. I know French. I can't really understand any Haitian Creole. It's very much a different language, but with a lot of French vocabulary and a lot of French influence mixed in. I find these sorts of pidgins and creoles so interesting.
Oh, they definitely are. And a lot of linguistic colleagues of mine are working in different parts of the world and conducting research on pidgins and on creoles. And I mean, so the creoles in particular, because the interesting thing about the creoles is that they're spoken as a native language by children. So the pidgins aren't, but so the creoles are really fully fledged languages in their own right because they have their own native speakers.
Yes, that's absolutely right. They absolutely do, and you can write books in those languages as well. And it seems quite different to me. And so there's a humorous, or at least I think it's humorous. Maybe it's not humorous. Maybe it's academic. But there's this question. English has so much French vocabulary. Exactly. Is English a French pidgin?
Yeah, that's a very, very famous debate. I mean, is it a pidgin or even a creole, because there's so many native speakers of the English language in the world. I'm no expert in historical linguistics, but as far as I'm aware, it really depends very much on how you define different aspects. But I think the important thing to take away from this is that there's a lot of hybridity in the English language, and not just in the English language, but also in other languages. And language is beautiful, and a lot of great things in life are hybrid, like cocktails. So I think it's very nice that in this sense, language is a bit like a cocktail after all.
Oh, yes, it is. Yes, it is. And interestingly with English, while there's so much French and Latin vocabulary, actually, as I understand it, if you look at the kind of the most basic, extremely high frequency words used in everyday ordinary speech, actually the vast majority of them are Germanic, English in origin. You could always find a fancy French or Latin alternative, but often there's kind of a simpler, more high frequency English version of that word. There is definitely beauty in hybridity. Lots of things can be hybrid, like cocktails, like cars, for example, as we mentioned earlier. Actually, for a time, actually maybe still, the fastest cars in the world were hybrids, because electric cars have faster acceleration than gasoline cars, but gasoline cars typically have a higher top speed. So if you want the best of both worlds, if you want to make the fastest car in the world, then you make it a hybrid gasoline electric for that super fast acceleration, and then it switches to gasoline for that higher top speed.
Yay! So let's celebrate hybridity in language and elsewhere.
Absolutely. Let's celebrate it. Let's encourage it. Let's call attention to it, and let's highlight how beautiful and fascinating and amazing it all is.
Yeah, absolutely. Hybridity, a diversity, similar things in some ways, something to celebrate and something that enriches the world.
Couldn't agree more, Christina. And with that, I think I'm going to get in my metaphorical, figurative, linguistic hybrid car and speed away.
Ooh, excellent idea. Well, so everyone out there, probably you might want to get in your hybrid cars as well. Stay curious, have fun with language.
And join us next time on Linguistics Behind the Scenes.